It's Thursday on Daily Delivery. Michael Rand here. Glad to be back for another day. Hope everybody's having a great day out there today. Cold one. I'm not breaking any news there. Stay bundled up, stay warm, stay inside with your favorite Minnesota-based sports podcast. Good show coming up. As always, Velle E. Neal III from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a few minutes. It is our Daily Delivery debate segment. Not a lot of disagreement this week. Sometimes we disagree more, but this week we will tackle three pretty big issues: Vikings versus Bears on Monday Night Football, Gophers hockey, and the state of baseball right now in the wake of the Juan Soto $765 million contract. Velle wrote about that today too, so you should check that out. Star Tribune, startribune.com. Have a Timberwolves thought at the end of the show, as I often do. First, though, what did I miss? You know, kind of just on a little journey, a little brain journey, a what-if journey this morning as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about and what the state of kind of three stories that have been on my mind and how they kind of converge conveniently right now. Number one, we got a question to the Access Vikings podcast that I think we'll address more on Friday's show. But it asks, what if Sam Darnold had been on the Vikings last season when Cousins got hurt? How might that have changed the season? And my first instinct is to say he certainly would have been better than everybody else that tried to fill in for him. Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall, even Josh Dobbs, who had a couple good games at the beginning of his run. They might have made the playoffs last year. Remember, they were 4-4 when Cousins went down. If Darnold would have played at this level, stepped in right away and played at this level, they might have been 9-8, 10-7. Who knows? That would have been an interesting what if. However, if that would have happened, they probably wouldn't have had the draft capital to trade up for J.J. McCarthy, or at least would have needed to expend a lot more future draft capital, and B, Sam Darnold might have played himself into a starting job for sure somewhere in 2024, such that he would not have been the starting quarterback for the Vikings this season. So that's an interesting what if, and it leads to more what ifs. Thinking about the Falcons, thinking about the future of Kirk Cousins and what the position looks like for the Falcons. What if the Falcons had done what the Vikings did this season and had in fact signed Sam Darnold instead of signing Kirk Cousins? Now think this through with me. Like, what they didn't make much sense at all in signing Cousins to what amounted to at least a 2-year guaranteed deal and then drafting Michael Penix Jr. mere 6 weeks afterwards. I don't know why they did that. The way they did it doesn't make any sense, because now everything you're reading, Bill Barnwell had a long piece on ESPN.com. A couple other ESPNers took a swing at this. Like, everything is pointing towards either Cousins getting benched towards the end of this season and then moving on to Penix for the short term and the long term, or at the very least hoping Cousins has a better stretch here so they can trade him in the offseason. His salary goes down next year, but they would still essentially be paying $62.5 million for 1 year of pretty mediocre to below average quarterback play. So not the smart move from the Falcons. What if they instead had done what the Vikings did and signed Sam Darnold? Would Kirk Cousins have then come back to the Vikings? Would we be having kind of this parallel universe where Darnold was on the Falcons, Cousins was on the Vikings? What kind of year would they be having in each place? Would Cousins be kind of picking up where he left off last year, or would we be seeing enough of these physical diminishments that we've seen with the Falcons that he would not have been the same quarterback with the Vikings, which again was never great, but was definitely better than what we've seen with the Falcons in a lot of stretches? How would that have played out with the Vikings? How would Darnold have fared with the Falcons in maybe not quite as friendly a QB system, as not quite as friendly a learning environment, although they certainly have good coaches there. They have a lot of good offensive talent around him, especially in the running game with Bijan Robinson. So how would that have played out? What would that have led to this season? Would their records be flipped, or would they both be struggling to a certain degree or succeeding to a certain degree? It's a fascinating what if to me that also is tied to one more what if. Bill Belichick just took the job at North Carolina. College coaching job. He's never been a college head coach. He is, 72 years old, I think. He's very close to breaking the NFL record for coaching victories. I think he's like 14 behind Don Shula. It seemed like he was desperate to get back to the NFL, and indeed, the team that he seemed most likely to go to this past offseason was, in fact, the Atlanta Falcons. What if the Falcons had gone with Bill Belichick instead of Raheem Morris? What might that have looked like in the big picture? Because you remember, I think there was even a podcast that Cousins went on sometime in the offseason between the end of the year and when he signed with Atlanta, where it was just this weird thing where he kind of went on and praised Bill Belichick, and it felt very much like he was making a play for, hey, if Belichick comes to Atlanta, I want to come play for him. I have this admiration for him. Now, of course, Belichick didn't wind up there. They didn't end up going that route. Cousins does still wind up in Atlanta, but what would a Belichick-Cousins pairing have looked like in Atlanta? Would he have wound up there anyway if Belichick had been there and had more success? Would we be having a different narrative conversation about Kirk Cousins right now instead of the one we're having right now where it looks like he's approaching being, not washed up, but just less of what he ever was, which was never great to begin with. So I don't know. I love dealing in the what if, the hypotheticals, things we'll never know, but that we want to know, replaying reality in different ways, things like that. And I just think this whole quarterback situation, which again has tentacles into 2025. We don't know what's going to happen with Darnold. We don't know what the Falcons are going to do. Both of those guys could be factors in the 2025 QB market elsewhere. If Cousins is getting traded, if Darnold is a free agent, both of those guys could be looking for new teams again, and teams could be choosing between those two guys again next year. So keep an eye out for that. Maybe these what-ifs don't fascinate you as much as they fascinate me, but the Vikings being 11-2, having just walloped the Falcons with Sam Darnold throwing 5 touchdown passes, having 11 TDs and no interceptions in his last 4 games, while Kirk Cousins throws no touchdowns and 8 interceptions, and now Belichick agreeing to be the head coach of North Carolina, which I'm kind of bummed. It's a year too late. We could have seen him play PJ Fleck's Gophers. They played him 2 years in a row, but not in the Belichick time. That would have been a lot of fun if it was his first year and you got to watch him play against the Gophers. Alas, that is not the case. He's going to the college ranks. All these things that could have been different. Instead, the reality we have right now is probably one that Vikings fans would choose every single time. In studio today with Velle E. Neal III from the Star Tribune. Velle, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Good to see you in person.
Good to see you, too. This is fun. Chip and I do this sometimes where we're both in the office. I don't know if we've done the daily delivery debate segment in the office before. Maybe once, but good to see you.
I was on one of your first podcasts, I remember.
You were.
Because I said, this is a podcast, right? And I said, so I can swear, right? You said, no.
Right. That's right. I've had to correct a few people along the way and beep some people out. It's kind of fun when I get to use my beep button. But thanks for being on again, as you usually are on Thursdays. We got 3 subjects to get to. Number 1, near and dear to your heart, and probably hurts a little bit. Vikings Bears on Monday Night Football this week. Vikings going in one direction, Bears going in a different direction. They have fired Matt Eberflus, but you track these franchises back almost 3 years now, and they were both looking for both a new GM and a new head coach after the 2021 seasons. Vikings went with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell and kind of did this competitive rebuild thing. The Bears said, we're going to tear it down. They hired Ryan Poles. They hired Matt Eberflus at that moment. It seems like the way the Bears did it was more conventional in terms of rip it down, but the Vikings have certainly been the more successful franchise so far. So I guess my question to you is, if you were the Bears or even the Vikings, what would you do differently if you had it to do all over again?
Well, I just think the pattern there, now in terms of looking at each approach, I could see the Will family never wanting to tank.
Right.
They would always want to have
hate losing.
a serviceable product on the field. And so I think Quesi's view of a competitive rebuild falls in line with that. The Bears roster was not good after the 2020 season, 2021 season.
Right.
And they were going to require a rebuild. It wasn't as if they had pieces there to take things to the next level. They were dealing with the skeletal remains of, they're toward the end of the Mitch Trubisky era and getting into the Justin Fields era. They didn't have DJ Moore, so I think they were about to let David Montgomery go to the line. So there was a lot of stuff going on there. The thing about the Bears is, and I was just looking this up and talking to some other people too. One thing's not clear though. I was still trying to figure out, did the Vikings actually offer Ryan Poles the job? I think there's evidence of that, but there's nothing concrete. Did he have a choice between Bears and Vikings?
I think he might have at a certain point. The Vikings definitely liked Ryan Poles, and then I think the Bears kind of made him an offer he couldn't refuse, basically, is the sequencing of it.
They did not let him out of Chicago.
Exactly.
That is true.
Right.
My concern is that the Bears had started to interview head coaching candidates before they hired Poles.
Which is weird. You don't do it that way.
When Poles was hired as GM, 3 days later, he named Eberflus his guy. I just think there was something wrong about not having a GM in place. That means Ed McCaskey was making the hire, and which is weird because he has he's not considered a football person and didn't have a football person below him either to help spearhead that campaign. And then Poles only needed 3 days. I think he interviewed 3 head coaches, and then all of a sudden he said, "Well, Flus is my guy." And that seemed a little hasty to me.
Yeah.
I wish they would have had more time. And guess what? They're going to have more time now because they just fired Eberflus.
Yes.
Now they're going to have months to find a replacement for him. So, and if Poles doesn't get this one right, then he's going to have a can tied to his ass as well.
Yes.
And headed out the door. So I think Poles should have been a little more thorough and a little more patient with how he went about identifying a head coach. And Ed McCaskey should have stayed the hell out of any football-related decisions and had someone who has some expertise. And on top of that, too, he hired Poles. Then he hired the guy who Poles had to report to afterwards, and Kevin Warren.
Yeah, so that was strange.
He went backwards twice.
He did.
Now, we didn't know that Warren was so that he was desiring to get in the NFL and get past the Big Ten jet stream like he did, because it was a crazy run for him. Vikings and Big Ten. Then let's expand to 18 teams and just make everything nuts and just basically destroy the Pac-12. And now I'm going to go to the Bears because they want help with a new stadium. It's a weird run with him.
It's like a Big Ten mercenary.
So, but the Bears are just backwards. They got the GM before the coach, and they got the president, CEO before the GM. So you reap what you sow. I think this is why they're one of the reasons why they're in the spot they're in today.
I would agree, and their timeline was weird anyway because they fired everybody like 1 year after drafting Fields, right? Like Fields was a 2021 draft pick, and then they get rid of everybody else, bring in a new staff, but they hire a defensive head coach for that job, and obviously he hires Getsy, right? That was his first offensive coordinator.
Yes.
He gets fired after 10 months? Not great.
Right. And then Shane Waldron comes in.
Shane Waldron also fired.
He doesn't last a year.
No.
And Thomas Brown is he was offensive coordinator. Now he's the interim head coach.
I mean, that's quite a rise for him, right? From wide receivers coach to interim offensive coordinator to interim head coach in a span of about 6 weeks.
Yeah. The Bears have been through like 7 coaches. He had 2 who had to leave. One resigned. One was shown the door, but both were HR department reasons.
Oh, yeah, it was like the defensive coordinator, right? Was it Alan Williams? Who was that?
Something like that, and the running back coach.
Okay.
And they both left for reasons that haven't been confirmed, but there's a lot of speculation.
Not good.
Because of workplace environment violations. So, once again, Eberflus is hiring Eberflus, who apparently did not know how to hire a coaching staff that can stay out of trouble, and the selection of offensive coordinator is a reflection on him. So the Bears have made a series of bad hires.
Yeah,
and that's, as I just said, you reap what you sow, because that's what happens when you end up with a 4-9 team with better talent than 4-9 suggest, and on a 7-game losing streak, about to go to Minnesota at US Bank Stadium on Monday Night Football.
Well, and like you're right, it's not like they don't have talent. Like Caleb Williams looks like he's starting to figure this out, especially now that they've changed coordinators, changed who's in charge of the offense. They've got a lot of other talented skill position players. And like if you go back to the beginning of this whole kind of arc at the start of 2022, I was pretty skeptical of the Vikings' path. Like the whole notion of competitive rebuild, I was like, you can't have it both ways. And they've kind of managed to have it both ways now where they've been good. That 13-4 season that nobody saw coming, and now this 11-2 season that very few people saw coming. Like they've been better because they're coaching, because of some of their free agent signings, but like they've threaded this almost impossible needle. While the Bears' approach has been good, their personnel has been the problem, right? Like the Vikings have hired the right people, and the Bears just haven't.
Correct. The infrastructure around the team is not as strong as it needs to be.
No,
and you can complain about Kwesi and his terrible first couple years of drafting and his first free agent class, which wasn't anything to write home about. This most recent one's a lot better, but that's because Brian Flores walked in and said, I want Van Ginkel, I want Greenland, I want these guys. And Kwesi got him, and you see the results.
True.
But he did hire the right coach in KOC.
Yes.
And KOC was able to put together a good staff.
Yes. And he got him to get Sam Darnold. Like, whoever he's taking advice from, he's the one that's making the final decision, and they've hit on like every single free agent they brought in this year. So kudos to them on that. They can clinch a playoff spot by beating the Bears. They can clinch even before that, I think, if the Thursday night game goes a certain way or a game after that goes a certain way.
One has to finish a tie, though, so I don't think
I don't know.
I was looking at the chart going, really, we shouldn't have to worry about ties as being part of the process.
We shouldn't, but it's possible. You never know. But okay, debate subject number 2, Lavelle. Moving on to Gopher hockey, something you're writing about this week. Men's hockey, big series against Michigan State. I believe it's 1-3. Is this the year? That's all that Gophers fans ever want to know. Is this the year? Because again, they're in a championship drought. It's been over 20 years since they won their last title. Their last title was in 2003. It's almost as big of a drought as the 23-year drought between 1979 and 2002 when they won the first of those back-to-back titles. So is this their year, and how are they going to get there?
Well, I would say this. We knew they were going to be a good team. We weren't sure they were going to actually rise to be number one in the standings as they are, right now. As we were talking off microphone, was that I still felt there was more buzz around the Brock Faber team, with Logan Cooley and
Matthew Nice
and Matty Nice. So, and of course, I was influenced because I covered those guys in the Olympics in 2022. 2022.
Yeah, that was right before that.
Yeah. So I was kind of influenced by that because I had been around those guys, so I had a chance to see what type of players they were, and so I was like, okay, these guys are legit. Not a lot of buzz, but they've got NHL prospects in the squad.
They've got guys.
Yeah, Sam Rinzo, right? And Snuggerud.
Yep.
Yep.
Matthew Wood, who's not playing this weekend because he's on the Canadian team, but
yeah. In fact, a couple of Gophers are on that. They're on their preliminary roster for the World Juniors,
right?
Which is I keep forgetting the World Juniors is around New Year's Eve. It seems like it's a weird time.
Who scheduled this? Soccer guys? Right in the middle of everything, just have another tournament.
So I will say this: though, the Gophers have played themselves into a spot where they need to be paid attention to.
Yeah,
we're going to want to see things up close and possible. And Logan Cooley, Snuggerud. Oh, Jimmy Snuggerud was on that team too.
He was young though. Yeah. He was young.
Jackson Lacombe, that's the other guy on that team. And Brodzinski. Yep. Now I recognize some of these guys.
That was a pretty good team. And that was the missed opportunity. Obviously, like that team was loaded, and they had a mix of talent, experience, everything. Everything was right there for them, and then just ran into a heartbreaker at the end.
Well, they were a period away.
They were like a minute away.
Yeah.
Like it was right there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Sometimes it's the years you don't expect as much, though. Like I think they had high expectations coming into this season, but sometimes it's the years you don't expect as much that end up being the special ones. You never know. But they're 15-1-2 going into this weekend against Michigan State. And again, truly, people don't start paying too much college hockey attention until after they get back from winter break, usually like January.
but a possibility for a statement this weekend.
Right. Another thing about that, about the Cooley-Faber group, too, at Mighty Nice, they'd all made it clear that they were staying at the University of Minnesota just to make a run at the national title.
Right.
Because they could have signed professional contracts well before that.
Correct.
So we haven't, it's not an issue with this year because there's no Olympic year or anything like that. So, I'm looking forward to watching this team play. So I've watched them on television enough. Yeah. So I want to see them up close and personal. I want to see the atmosphere at Mariucci.
Yeah.
So it's going to be that time of year once everybody gets back from break.
Then Faber that year, remember, went straight from that disappointment to the Wild and played in the playoffs. Like, he was that good. Like, they just threw him right in the lineup. He played like 1 or 2 regular season games, and he was just like a mainstay on that playoff team a couple of years ago.
I think he was logging heavy minutes already. I think he was on the second penalty kill.
He was they were just like, this guy is that good right away. We were like, are you serious? Like, they're going to put him in here? But he was just that good. And then they, obviously last year, his first full year, he showed why they had so much faith in him.
I remember watching him in the Olympics. The first game, a group play, I believe it was Slovakia.
Yeah.
And that's where Matty Nice's family's from.
Okay.
So he's like talking trash with Slovakian to the
that's awesome.
Slovakian team. And there's like 25, 26-year-olds on this team. It also included Slapkowski, Jeru Slapkowski, who ended up being the first overall pick by Montreal in the draft 2 years later.
Yeah.
And like some 27-year-old guy like clobbers Faber in the board. So Faber has to come off for treatment. I thought he was done for the rest of the tournament. But he gutted it out. So I was like, okay, I'm impressed. Yeah.
He's a tough guy.
Those people from Maple Grove, you can't doubt them.
Last one, Lavelle. What are you supposed to do right now if you're the Twins and you're looking at Juan Soto getting $765 million from the Mets? This is a different stratosphere. They're not playing the same game as some of these other teams are.
No, it's been like that in Major League Baseball. And actually, I want it to get worse so it could get better.
Okay.
I want it to reach critical mass so it finally can be dealt with. Now, Rob Manfred's on his own schedule because he's retiring in 2029, and 2028 is where a lot of these local TV deals are scheduled to expire. So it'll be under the purview of the league as they try to get a streaming package and maximize their product to the masses. But meanwhile, we're still going to have such a disparity in payrolls. And, Max Fried signed for $218 million, which is the most for a left-handed starter ever. And you still have Corbin Burns as a free agent. He's probably going to get $250 million, maybe $300 million.
Right.
Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to be a free agent after this next season.
Yeah.
I think Kyle Tucker is going to be a free agent after this next season.
Okay.
And you're going to see some gargantuan numbers thrown at those guys. Because the Dodgers signed Ohtani and used deferred money.
Right.
The Mets did not sign, which is scary.
Just money.
And some people were pointing to that going, this is why we did not want Steve Cohen to own the team.
Right.
Because he doesn't care.
No.
He's not cared. And what they should, but when, I don't know how other owners can sit there and see that the Mets have payroll of $200 million more than the A's and not believe something's wrong.
Right.
And so, I'm writing about this for tomorrow, actually. And my thing is, currently about 45 to 48% of local television revenue is shared, and the movement's going to be, because it should, 100% of local TV revenues all put in a pot and split up equally. Now, the big market teams are going to whine like babies about it. Because,
of course they are.
I can't sign the next Shohei Ohtani.
Right.
But it's for the greater good of the league.
Of course it is.
Someone has to understand. It's got to be for the greater good. You're a Twins fan. I know the cheap Paulette's mantra, and trust me, the family's done a lot in this town to anger people and upset people with their decision making. But they still put out largely competitive teams. Last year was just a weird confluence of factors of players getting injured and going into slumps at the wrong time. No one saw them barfing up their last 29 games last year, like the Twins
last 39.
did.
Yeah, they were 71-53 at one point, and then just fell apart.
Still, they come back next year, and if health is like your biggest hope to compete, that's a great thing. That's better than saying I need a number one starter. It's better to say that than I need a cleanup hitter, although the Twins could use the cleanup hitter.
You could use both those things, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, like a Pablo Lopez.
But still, if health is one of the big keys, that's not the worst thing in the world.
That's true. They're all playing a different game, and the trump card in all this is this. I looked this up when I was on with Royce a couple of days ago. collective bargaining agreement expires after the end of the 2026 season.
There could be Armageddon there.
There could be. Like this could be, they could be headed for something where it's just like, hey, this is not tenable anymore. And if the big market teams don't start moving a certain direction, the small market teams could just be like, we can't do this anymore.
No, exactly. Exactly right. But the owners are going to have to be tactical about this. I don't think they can walk through the door and go salary cap to the Players Association. That's not going to go anywhere.
No.
And no one wants a prolonged work stoppage either. Baseball just crossed a $12 billion threshold in revenue generating.
Yeah.
So you want to take a seat back after getting to that point? And I know because Manfred was walking on with his chest puffed out at the World Series. Yes, I got my two big market teams in the World Series. Blah, blah, this is great for baseball. It's because it's great for Major League Baseball's coffers, not necessarily Major League Baseball.
Well, yeah, and what it did too is when you got those two big market teams together, though, it's like it made it seem like it was even more rigged. It was like, well, look at the payrolls; they're like $300 million each. Like teams, yes, there's been a lot of different teams who have won the World Series in the last 25, 30 years, but it's like different ones popping up every now and then, kind of getting like the right confluence before they have to shed payroll and stuff like that.
When the Royals won the World Series,
you can't be consistently at the top without being able to spend.
Yes, three of the top 4 highest payrolls make the Final Four.
Yes,
in baseball,
and that's how it's going to be even more, I think, going forward, unless something stops.
So if you're a Twins fan, you're frustrated.
You are.
But I'm saying you can't blame the family.
Don't
hate the player, hate the game.
Well, and who knows how long they're going to keep owning the team. I don't know where that's at, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be quick, this ownership change, right?
It sounds like it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
That they identify people. I mean, I'm not trying to like make calls on this. I keep hearing things here and there.
Yeah.
I was thinking Marty Davis would be a good option because I was told he always wanted to own a sports team, but as of now, it doesn't look like he is interested in getting involved this time. So I don't know who or where they're looking for. I don't know if they're waiting to see who does not get the Wolves.
Yeah.
But here's my thing: if A-Rod and Laurie don't get the basketball team and they want to make a play for the baseball team, how can Major League Baseball owners approve A-Rod when they suspended him for 200 games
That's a good point.
For violating the drug policy? I just can't see how that could possibly work out.
No, they seem like better basketball owners, and maybe Mr. Glenn Taylor would like to own the Twins.
At least they couldn't demand a new stadium.
No, at least we got that. That's covered. That part of it is not part of the dialogue, at least not for the next 20 or 30 years, I hope. Lavelle, appreciate it as always. Good to be with you in studio. We'll do this again next week.
Sounds like a plan.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Good stuff, as always, from Lavelle. Like I mentioned, he has a Twins column in today's paper and on StarTribune.com, so check that out. Also check out Bobby Nightingale's coverage from the winter meeting. Sounds like Scott Boras, the agent for Carlos Correa, saying, hey, Carlos is happy in Minnesota. Don't worry about it. Twins officials trying to say, hey, any kind of Carlos Correa rumblings, trade rumors, overblown, not looking to trade Carlos Correa. Do $36 million next season. That's a big chunk of a payroll. I know they plan to be competitive next year, so maybe next year is not the time to do it, not the time to make the trade, but it's harder and harder for me to imagine him playing out his full 6-year contract with the Twins with 4 years, expensive years left. So that bears watching, especially when you have to ask the agent if he is happy here. Well, let's finish with the cooler. This struck me from Chris Hines' story on the Wolves. It's just kind of an odds and ends kind of notebook, but it led with the Wolves have graded out Anthony Edwards' clutch time decision-making. And I think this is kind of interesting. I'm sure it's very subjective. It's very kind of hindsighty, but it's fine. It's a good exercise. And the upshot of their kind of effort this season is that they're happy with his decision-making. They're saying 80% of the time, roughly, he is making the right decision. Now, this stands in contrast to some of the decisions he made in the last game against Golden State. Played a little bit too much hero ball, missed a bunch of shots down the stretch. He hit a 3 that put him up 106-105, then missed a whole bunch of shots, 6 in a row after that. They lost 114-106. So that's good. His decision-making is evolving, it sounds like, and that should be happening. The thing that kind of struck me from this story, though, is that Finch said that last year Edwards was making the right decision in clutch time only around 50% of the time. That's a concern to me. That's as much of a concern to me as the 80% is a boon right now. Because last year, yeah, Edwards was still young. He's only 23 right now. He was 22 at the start of last season. But he was still in his 4th year in the league. If you're in your 4th year in the league and you're only making the right decision in clutch time half the time, that to me is a pretty big red flag that you are not developing the way you should be, that you're not learning the lessons you should be learning. For the Wolves' sake, for Edwards' sake, I'm glad he's learning right now. I'm glad he's making decisions right now that will benefit the Wolves in clutch time. But the fact that last year when they went to the Western Conference Finals, when they won 56 regular season games, your best player was only making the right decision in clutch time half the time. It tells me that maybe his decision-making last year wasn't where it needed to be, and neither was his development. I don't know if that's on him. I don't know who that's on, but I don't think it's a great thing that by year 5, he is finally making the right decision most of the time in clutch time. That will do it for me today. Plenty of stuff coming up on tomorrow's show. Ben Gessling expected to join me from the Star Tribune for some Vikings talk leading into Monday Night Football against the Bears, so stick around for that. Until then, I'm Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your freezing cold Thursday. Back at it again tomorrow.